the people of Europe aren't putting up with this. In fact, they had European elections just this last week, and the results have basically completely changed the dynamic within the European Parliament. The results of this were so shocking with regards to France that it basically looks like our referendum map. So you can see that, that you guys might remember our referendum map with regards to the voice of the Parliament. It was just Canberra. Not even the Northern Territory, but it was just Canberra that voted for the establishment's proposal to put an Aboriginal voice in the Parliament. This particular map here shows you the blue area, which is basically the more right-wing anti-mass immigration movement. They're not Nazis. They're just people that, they think it's just too quick culturally, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of everything. And the government's not listening. And that's exactly what we're seeing with regards to this map, the blue area, whereas Macron's sort of party is more in amongst Paris, which is what you can see that dot is.
Sorry, where's Paris? Can you just point out Paris? I can't see Paris there.
Sorry, guys. It's not 4K. Sorry, guys. So Elon Musk, President Macron has basically called an early election as a result of this. I don't know what he's doing. I'm not sure if he's trying to strategically stem the blood from flowing. He's just trying to preempt Marine Le Pen from coming in and basically ruining it. So that's set for Sunday, the 30th of June to the 7th of July. It goes over a period of time there. And what I'm expecting from there is, most likely Marine Le Pen, she's not running directly against Macron. It's her number two who would become the prime minister, not the president, the prime minister. That's what we're looking at, and it's the legislative branch. But very soon, in the next few years, we could see a runoff again between, as you can see on the screen, Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron. I'm really interested to see what exactly happens here. Their day of reckoning is happening in the European Union and in these countries. Do you guys have any thoughts on this particular thing?
I think it's hilarious. I think it's but this has been obviously coming for quite some time. I mentioned earlier, every culture breeds its own counterculture. Let me add a second layer to that. When you see a revolution eating its own, and we see that, okay, the heroes of the left, the Martina Navratilovas, first openly lesbian sports person, world champion tennis player, one of the greats of history in tennis, and celebrated for coming out and being bold and so forth. Now, persona non grata. We don't talk about Martina Navratilova anymore. Why? Because she got off the train at her stop and didn't keep going to everyone else's stop. Look at J.K. Rowling. Look at Germaine Greer. Look at these people who were heroes of the left not very long ago. And now they're persona non grata. The revolution is eating its own. And I have a theory. So every culture breeds its own counterculture. That's obvious. The revolution always ends up eating its own. That's also relatively obvious. But what is really interesting to me is what happens when you see both of those things happening at the same time. When you see the revolution eating its own and the counterculture beginning to rise up, and I began saying this about 2 years ago, I said that's when you know that massive social change is about to happen far faster than anyone thinks is possible. That's what happened in the 1960s, and we actually haven't seen that convergence of those two events since then until now. And I began saying 2 years ago, we are on the cusp of an enormous and very rapid social change because those two forces are converging.
It's funny you should say that, and I'll throw it to you guys in a sec, but I've noticed as a data point, young people, the Gen Z, they're calling them Zoomers because they're as conservative as the Boomer generation at that age. They have actually been leading this particular revolution in a lot of these countries. TikTok and a lot of other social media organizations that young people are on, a lot of young people are seeing Nigel Farage outcompete the boring Conservative, the boring Labor Party. And I have a lot of confidence in this. I love saying that line, God's a funny guy, and I just can't help but see these things come through.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the change that you've seen there in Europe. I think part of it has been that the COVID era, so many people have now seen that the government, particularly the left government, has been lying to them. Mm-hmm. They see, I think this has had a big cultural change that so many people, yes, the big leftist government, they'll protect us, they'll look after us. And people are now saying, hang on, we've been lied to about this. And they said young people are seeing what's happening, in their countries all around the world. I'll never own a house. I won't be able to travel like previous generations did because they're going to put all these taxes on, on airfare and air travel sort of thing. I'll live in a 15-minute city, and I'll probably have to work till I'm 75 because there won't be a pension there. That's the future that young people see and say, hang on a minute, We want better than that. And that's why you are, I think, seeing this huge change in Europe. I think you will see we're seeing it in the polling in the US, a shift to Trump. Where you mentioned in the UK, the lessons out of the UK are if you have a conservative government and they do not act and govern as conservatives and stand up for conservative values, they will destroy themselves. That is what we see happening in the UK. They're going to hand the power over to a Labor government, which will have 4 or 5 years of disaster for the UK. It looks like then in that opposition period, reform will take over. We saw that in recent years happen in Canada. And that's the trend. We see it in, as you mentioned, Victoria. Victorian Liberal Party, because they are so weak, because they are not standing up for the values and trying to mirror what the left are telling them, simply fade away in the polls, and you'll see the destruction of the parties.
Yeah, well, what you've got is, as they were saying, the Great Reset. Do we really, though? Because when you look at how people have woken up to the lies that governments have been saying worldwide throughout COVID, once you see one lie, you start looking for others. And you can't actually shut down seeing them everywhere. It's left, right and centre. So I think it's more the Great Awakening than the Great Reset. And you're absolutely right, Joel. People are waking up to all this. You've got the younger generations, as previously mentioned, are looking at Andrew Tate and hero worshipping Andrew Tate. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but he has done a lot of good for the youth of today in trying to make them stronger and not emasculated, because we do have this emasculation of the male, especially the white male, which should not be occurring. We should all be proud of whoever we are, wherever we are.
No, absolutely. That's actually a perfect lead into the next story. The next story